The Varian Expanse was cursed space. At least, that's what the old freighter pilots used to say. Long stretches of asteroid-strewn darkness, where old wars left wreckage and whispers in their wake. No official charts covered it completely, and no government claimed responsibility for what happened there. It was lawless, chaotic, and most importantly, quiet, until something broke the silence. A beacon ignited. An emergency frequency over 40 standard years old, faint and distorted. The signal barely pushed past the dust and dark matter fields that surrounded the expanse. But it pulsed with intent. A Veltari medical unit transponder code, classified as active battlefield triage. That meant someone out there was dying, and their automatic still had enough power to ask for help. No one should have been there. No one living. Anyway, the call reached a relay buoy near Station Kestrel, a border outpost of the Galactic Rescue Command GRC. Protocol dictated immediate response. Not even bureaucratic apathy could override the mandate to recover wounded sentients, no matter their species. The GRC dispatched Recon Unit Theta 9, a mixed-species rescue crew specializing in biological triage. 12 medics, 2 combat pilots, and 1 alien veterinary specialist. Theta 9 was built for emergencies, but even they hesitated when they got the full coordinates. Sector 9, Varian Expanse. Still, they went. The moon had no name. Theta 9 shuttle descended through a storm of methane vapor and jagged, lightning-laced clouds. Static scratched at their comms. They followed the beacon to a shallow canyon, where fractured stone and glimmering gas vents spewed white mist into the pale air. There it was, the wrecked Veltari medical frigate, skewered on an ironstone outcrop, its hull split open like a bleeding shellfish, glittering in the violet sky. Scorch marks along the stern. Impact trauma. No energy weapons. Just velocity. Something went wrong in the descent. As the rescue crew began their scans, movement inside the wreck registered on their boards. "Single survivor," said Pilot Kira, narrowing her eyes at the life signature. "Faint. Massive biometrics." "Could be a trap," warned Devar, the tactical lead. "Too big to be Veltari." "It's not Veltari," came a voice behind them. Dr. Zalek, the alien vet, his serpentine eyes narrowing at the data. "It's Korthari." Murmurs rippled through the team. Everyone knew the Korthari, a species bred for war. Apex predators from the jungle world Rothkar, standing over 2 meters tall with a radial limb system and armored skin like obsidian scale. Dangerous even when sedated. They were used by Veltari military forces as battle companions. Never deployed, without a bonded handler. But they were also fiercely intelligent and fiercely loyal. Why would a Korthari be on a medical frigate? "Ask someone," Zalek answered calmly. "Some Veltari battalions use them as trauma guardians. They bond with medics and help with evacuation under fire. Biological triage engines. Efficient and expendable." "Expendable?" Kira echoed, disbelieving. Zalek shrugged. "When their bonded handler dies, the Korthari usually self-terminate. Their nervous system destabilizes without the psychic tether. Meaning we'll find a dying war beast with a broken brain," Zalek said, stepping toward the shuttle's ramp. "Don't bother prepping the trauma bay. It won't survive the hour." They found the Korthari beneath collapsed beams in the ship's rear cargo hold. Its breathing was ragged, ribcage twitching beneath its torn carapace. One of its 8 limbs was crushed, its tongue lolled from its mouth, thick with coagulated silver-blue blood. The creature's 3 eyes blinked asynchronously, each full of panic and pain. Its name, carved into a brass tag braided around its horned neck, was Tyrrek. Beside it, half-trapped beneath its curled body, was the shredded remains of a Veltari field medic, the telltale markings of a bonded handler visible in glowing ink across the corpse's wrist and collarbone, bonded unto death. Zalek scanned Tyrrek, then stepped back. Neural feedback loop is already in progress. It's a cortical collapse. There's no functional cognitive pattern. This is what happens when they lose the tether. They break. "Can't we sedate it?" Kira asked, her hand resting on the emergency tranquilizer holster. Zalek shook his head. "The trauma isn't just physical. It's psychic. They're empathic, but one way. They imprint, sure, but once the source of emotional calibration dies, he looked again. There's no recovery protocol. Standard procedure is to euthanize. The room was quiet except for Tyrik's slow, agonizing breaths. Then came the sound of boots on steel. A figure moved through the wreck, crouched low to avoid beams and sparking conduits. She wore the dull red uniform of a Terran biospecialist, her nameplate half-faded. Dr. Mirabelle, human, late 30s, known more for refusing field promotions and for medals, though she had a few of those too. She said little as she knelt beside the Korthari, placing a gloved hand gently on the bloody flank. Zalek frowned. Dr. Bell, you're not certified in cross-psychic trauma for Korthari. I don't need certification to recognize pain, she said, pulling a portable scanner from her belt. Zalek's voice sharpened. You're wasting time. It's already lost its sense of self. That's not a patient. It's a dying weapon. Bell didn't respond. She leaned closer to the beast's head, her voice barely audible now. She whispered, Easy, buddy. The Korthari's third eye, nearly closed, fluttered open. The breathing steadied. Its twitching limbs stilled. Zalek took a step back. That's not possible, he murmured. Bell slowly removed her glove, pressing her palm against the beast's scaled snout. Its mind is in freefall, she said softly, but it's still in there. Zalek's voice was cold. You're risking your life, and this entire team. Bell didn't look at him. She just whispered again, Easy, buddy. You're safe now. And for the first time since the crash, the Korthari exhaled, long and deep, as if releasing a breath it had been holding for hours. Dr. Mirabelle sat cross-legged beside the Korthari for almost 2 hours without moving. Around her, the crash site hummed with half-life, sparking conduits, flickering monitors, the dull clank of Theta, 9 crew members combing the wreckage for anything salvageable. The air was thick with methane haze, but she didn't notice. She was watching the creature breathe. Tyrik, the name on its tag, sounded like a growl when she said aloud, the kind of name you only say after earning trust. She hadn't earned that yet, but she was trying. The Korthari's chest expanded slowly, the movement uneven. Its lower limbs had gone limp. A fracture in the central thoracic plate oozed silvery blood that glistened in the dim light beneath the gore and trauma. She could see what had once been majestic, symmetrical, and muscular, built for grace as much as brutality. It was a living weapon. But weapons didn't tremble in their sleep. Zalek stood at the edge of the wreck's medical bay, arms crossed, eyes narrow. He'd stopped arguing. For now, behind him, a trio of medics waited with a portable stasis unit, ready to initiate what they called a gentle disengagement, a euphemism for offloading the patient into permanent unconsciousness. Painless, efficient, humane. To them, Bell ignored them all, turning her scanner to manual mode. She wasn't interested in the standard vital readouts. Those were all screaming DOA anyway. Instead, she focused on the creature's neural resonance. Tiny fluctuations in electromagnetic patterns across its skull ridges and spinal root. Her hand hovered just above its crown. Zalek spoke up again, voice flat. There's nothing to read. The neural link is gone. It was tied to the Veltari handler. Without that anchor, the Korthari's brain enters self-destructive cascade. It doesn't understand death the way we do. It doesn't even resist it. It just follows. Bell didn't look at him. You talk like it's a machine with a broken switch. He gave a slow blink, his vertical pupils narrowing. We have protocols for a reason. And protocols don't cover this. She turned the scanner so he could see. The display showed a neural feedback loop. Yes, but underneath that, almost buried, was something else. Weak, but structured. Repeating. Do you see that? She asked. There's a patterned echo in the subcortical region. Reflexive firing. It's reliving something. A loop, he said. A death loop. Memory collapse. The mind eats itself when the link breaks. Bell shook her head. Not collapse. Not yet. It's reliving a moment. She paused. Want to care? Zalek looked skeptical. How do you know? because the pulses correspond with reduction in cortisol analogs and limbic stress markers. Her voice softened. Something in its mind is comforting it. Even now. Silence. Zalek exhaled slowly through his nose slits. That's worse. It means it's clinging to an illusion of safety. That'll kill it faster. Belle finally stood, stretching her stiff back. Not if we build something new. He gave her a cold stare. You're not suggesting. Yes, she said firmly. We can replicate the neural bond. Impossible. The Veltari use genetically engineered receptor matrices, organic tethering. You're human. I'm also an emotional interface technician with 6 years of trauma bonding in post-conflict zones, she said. I've stabilized suicidally grieving symbiotes. I've helped void whales re-anchor after psychic separation from their birthing pods. This isn't new. Zalek's jaw tightened. The Kurthari are different. She stepped closer to him. You know what I think, she said quietly. You're not scared it won't work. You're scared it will. Because then we'll have to admit we've been letting these creatures die for nothing. He flinched barely, but she saw it and walked past him. The tent module was deployed 2 kilometers from the crash, on slightly more stable terrain. There, under a reinforced dome, they set up what passed for a field ICU. Inside was a sterile cradle surrounded by a tangle of cables and glowing consoles. The Kurthari was suspended in an adjustable support mesh, its body lined with auto-injectors, cooling pads, and pulse monitor nodes. A soft hum filled the space, the sound of low-level psionic shielding designed to protect the team from residual emotional emissions. Dr. Bell stood outside the inner barrier, staring at the creature. It's awake, she murmured. Tyrek's primary eye was open, glassy but tracking movement. Its breathing was uneven again. One of its limbs twitched as it tried to move. A medic, a young Tyrenian named Sol, looked at Bell nervously. We've administered the full sedative suite, ma'am. It shouldn't be conscious. It's fighting it, Bell whispered, a strange awe in her voice. It doesn't want to fade. Not yet. Sol blinked. But they're supposed to shut down when... They're not supposed to do anything. Bell cut in. That's the problem. We've been treating them like systems, not souls. She turned to the console and keyed in her neural sync signature. The system beeped, prompting biometric authorization. A second confirmation appeared. Emotional anchor link request. Species unknown / bond type. Temporary / risk. High. Do you accept liability? Bell placed her hand on the pad. Confirmed. Sol's eyes widened. You're really going to anchor with a Kurthari? They're Class A Apex. If it panics... I won't let it, Bell said. And it won't. Not if I'm gentle. She slipped on the neural mesh, a crown-like rig that settled into her scalp and temples. Lights flared. Her heart rate synced with the Kurthari's. Slowly, its erratic rhythm pulsed toward hers. Initializing interface, the system intoned. Prepare for resonance. Then came the flood. She was no longer in the tent. She stood in jungle, dense and alive, with leaves the size of ships and air thick with the scent of blood and rain. She saw fire, smoke, and then hands. Hands brushing against obsidian scales. Voices calling out in a language she didn't understand but felt in her bones. Laughter, warmth, companionship. The handler, Veltari, young and solemn, stood beside Tyrek. They fought together, slept under the same tarp. The Veltari read aloud from books. He fed Tyrek by hand. Whispered things Bell couldn't hear but felt. Comfort, care, connection. And then the crash. Pain. Darkness. Silence. Bell felt like a black hole tearing through her. The moment the tether snapped. The moment Tyrek realized it was alone. That it had failed. That it should die. No. She pushed against the spiral. Held fast. She whispered, aloud and within the link. Easy, buddy. You're not alone anymore. And Tyrek, somewhere deep within the jungle of its collapsing mind, heard her. Back in the tent, the Kurthari let out a long, trembling breath. The machines around it stabilized. Sol looked up at the monitors. Vitals leveling. Neural activity rebounding. Zalek, who had silently entered during the procedure, stared in disbelief. It's impossible, he said. It shouldn't be able to form a new tether that fast. Belle sat back, pulling off the mesh rig. Her face was pale, sweat streaking her forehead. Her voice shook, but it was steady enough. It didn't form a new one, she said. It let me in to help hold the old one. Zalek didn't respond. He didn't need to. The look on his face said it all. The tent was quiet, save for the soft ticking of biomonitors and the occasional hiss of a cooling valve. The kind of quiet that made it feel like time had slowed, held in suspension between life and death. Dr. Mirabelle sat slumped in a recovery chair, electrodes still stuck to her temple from the neural anchor session. Her fingers trembled faintly, a side effect of the emotional feedback. The price of tethering your nervous system to a mind reeling in grief. Across the room, the Kurthari lay still but no longer comatose. Tirek's massive chest rose and fell in slow, steady breaths. Every once in a while, his primary eye flickered open to scan the tent, never straying far from Belle. The bond had held, but something was still wrong. Beneath the calm surface, pain still seethed in the blood. Belle leaned over the exam table, reviewing the latest readouts. They weren't promising. He's stabilizing, yes, she murmured aloud, half to herself, half to the creature watching her. But it's not just trauma. Something else is breaking him down. She zoomed in on the blood chemistry panel. Elevated cortisol analogs, imbalanced neuroelectrical discharge, adrenal overstimulation. None of it tracked with simple injury. Even the immune response was contradictory, both hyperactive and collapsing at the same time. A war within the blood. She keyed in a manual override on the stasis suite and took a fresh sample. Zalek stepped into the room, arms folded, his tone as clinical as ever. You're exhausting him. His immune system's burning out trying to respond to multiple false signals. Belle shot him a glance. I know. It's the tether fracture, he added. The bond with his Veltari handler wasn't just emotional. There's biochemistry in play. The Kurthari were designed to link on a molecular level, share hormonal triggers, even partially merged endocrine rhythms. Belle nodded grimly. Then the trauma isn't just psychic. It's systemic. Zalek stepped forward, which is why, again, I advise euthanasia. She spun on him. And I'm telling you, again, it's not over. He looked at her for a long beat, then turned to the monitors. His voice softened, almost curious. You still feel him, don't you? Even now? Belle didn't answer right away. She turned back to Tirek. Yes, she whispered. The tether was faint, but still present. Not a bond in the Veltari sense. Not complete, but enough. Emotions drifted across the connection like shadowed water. Fear, confusion, the echo of remembered commands in a language Belle didn't know, but understood instinctively. Protect, guard, stay, and guilt, a wall of guilt that threatened to drown everything else. She looked over at Zalek. He blames himself for crash. Of course he does, Zalek replied. His handler's death would trigger massive trauma loops, especially if the Kurthari failed to prevent it. He didn't fail, Belle said. The ship malfunctioned. I saw in the memory echo, external systems failure. Doesn't matter, Zalek said. To Tirek, it was his duty to survive with his partner. The bond was his purpose. Belle stood and stared down at the beast. Then maybe the only way to save him is to give him a new one. The solution wasn't in sedation, or surgery, or anything the Galactic Rescue Command authorized. Belle had to dig deeper, into ancient biotech protocols banned decades ago after the Veltari Kurthari uprising. She accessed black box data from the crash and dug through the dead handler's implant logs. Most of it was corrupted, but a few traces of joint and neural imprint routines remained, like half-burned maps of the language built between minds. Using them was risky. They weren't designed for humans. But then, nothing about this mission had been. 30 hours later, Belle stood in the middle of the field ICU surrounded by makeshift machinery, jury-rigged uplinks, and enough backup energy to power a mining colony. At the center, a biosynchronization chamber with 2 entry points, one for her, one for Tirek. This is madness, Zalek muttered, observing from the sealed viewing room. If the link backfires, You could suffer permanent cortical scarring. Psychic bleed. Your memories could be overwritten, I know, Belle said, climbing into her end of the chamber. But if this works, it might stabilize the emotional hemorrhaging and give his body time to heal. She looked across at Tyrek, now sedated but not unconscious. His eyes, those alien, ancient eyes, found hers through the glass. "I'll be with you soon," she whispered. "Just hold on." Inside the link, time didn't move like it did in the real world. There was only sensation. Belle stood again in the jungle. But it was different this time. Not a memory. Something deeper. The trees bled light. The ground pulsed with Tyrek's heartbeat. She wasn't a guest anymore. She was inside him. She saw the world through his memories, training under searing suns, blood-soaked nights on alien battlefields, soft moments beside a fire, head in a lap, warmth and safety and ritual feeding, all centered on his Veltari partner, a bond unbreakable, until it broke. The moment of loss was a storm. Static, shattered stars. The handler dying in his arms, mind fragmenting as the link dissolved, leaving Tyrek howling inside himself. Belle felt it all. Then something changed. Tyrek felt her. Not just her presence, but her will. She didn't try to replace the bond. She couldn't, but she witnessed it. All of it. The love, the loss, the loyalty. And slowly, carefully, she did something else. She reached out and placed her hand on the spectral version of his head. "You didn't fail," she said in the link, her voice echoing like a ripple in space-time. "You stayed. You survived. That's enough." And Tyrek, massive and broken, apex predator and grieving soul, lowered his head into her hands and finally, stopped trembling. Back in the chamber, monitors beeped furiously, then slowed, pulse normalized, hormone levels adjusted. For the first time since the crash, Tyrek entered true sleep. Not a coma, not unconsciousness, but rest. Real rest. Zalek stared at the readings and let out a long, low breath. "She did it," Sol whispered. "No," Zalek said, almost reverently. "They did it." Belle awoke 3 hours later, drained but intact. She walked to Tyrek's side, brushing her hand against the thick scales of his snout. His breath warmed her fingers. He rumbled softly in return, a sound that wasn't quite a growl. Not aggression, not pain, recognition. Sol entered, holding a new collar tag in hand. From command, he said, they wanted to classify him as biologically unbonded and transfer him to behavioral recovery on Station Theros. Belle took the tag and turned it over. On it was a new line. Handler, unassigned. Bond, disrupted/non-transferable. She stared at it for a long time, then dropped it in the waste bin. "Print a new one," she said. "Put this instead." Handler, Dr. Mirabelle, provisional emotional anchor. Sol grinned. And command. Belle looked down at the creature beside her. "We'll deal with command later." The shuttle bay was unusually quiet. Theta 9's field crew had mostly dispersed, their job done. The wrecked Veltari frigate had been stripped, tagged, and vaporized to avoid scavenger interception. Medical logs were uploaded to Central Command, with most of the team already en route to their next assignment. Only a skeleton crew remained behind, and Belle, still standing at the edge of the landing pad, staring up at the ship waiting to take them home. Behind her, Tyrek stood like a living shadow. The wind from the open bay doors rustled across his scarred obsidian carapace. His wounds had healed, mostly, visibly at least. Internally, Belle knew the pain lingered. Not physical anymore, but embedded in the quiet places of his mind, like bruises on the soul. He didn't need a leash. Or a cage. He just stood close, waiting, as if sensing her thoughts. "You don't have to follow me," she said softly, not turning around. "You're free now. No handler. No orders. You can go where you want." A pause, then a low, slow rumble, deep enough to resonate in her chest. She turned. Tyrek's eyes, all three of them, were fixed on her with startling clarity. The Korthari lowered his head slightly, in the gesture of voluntary alignment, the nonverbal declaration of chosen loyalty. Not programmed, not imprinted, chosen. They boarded the med shuttle together. Bell gave no explanation to the flight officer, who simply nodded and logged Tirek as classified biological accompaniment. No one argued, not after the report Zalek filed to command. Subject, Korthari 2231-T, alias Tirek. Status, cognitively stabilized post-bond disruption. Recommendation, emotional anchor provisional bond maintained. Comment, survival not attributed to regenerative treatment. Survival attributed to link recreation facilitated by human vet Dr. M. Bell. Conclusion, subject demonstrates preference for continued association. Reclassification advised. Zalek never admitted it directly, but when he left the station, he gave Bell a slow nod. The kind professionals give each other when language would only dilute the truth. 2 weeks later, they arrived at Station Haven, a deep-orbit triage outpost and long-term recovery center on the edge of contested space. Tirek wasn't put in isolation. Bell had argued for that. He's not a patient. He's a person recovering from grief. Don't lock him in a cage just because you don't know how to talk to him. And she stayed with him day after day as the medical staff adjusted their models. Feeding routines shifted. Stimulus therapy began. A Veltari elder was brought in remotely to record ancestral calming chants. Tirek would sometimes respond. Other times he'd ignore everything except Bell's voice. She didn't have the handler training, but she had something else. Empathy and patience. One day, while Bell was sitting in the rec module repairing a diagnostic pad, Tirek walked in carrying something in his mouth, a synthetic bandolier harness, adapted for medical personnel. Bird on one side, torn on the other. Bell froze. It was his handler's, recovered from the crash wreckage. He laid it gently at her feet and sat. Bell swallowed hard. "I'm not him," she whispered. Tirek said nothing, just watched. "I didn't fight in your war. I didn't save you back then." Silence. "But I'm here now." He lowered his head again. And this time, when she reached out to touch the scarred place along his neck ridge, he leaned into it completely. That evening, she filed her own report. Subject, Korthari 2231-T Tirek. Status, emotional anchor bond. Functional, voluntary. Proposal, reclassify subject from weaponized service organism to recovery-capable sentient partner. Comment, he doesn't need a new handler. He needs a life beyond the war. Request, authorization for relocation to Earth-based xenotherapeutic programs, with vet support staff, self-included. She sent the report before she could second-guess it. Command replied 6 days later. Their message was short. Relocation approved. Bond status, unorthodox but effective. Reclassification request, under review. Note, Dr. Bell, you are hereby appointed as Tier 1 Sentient Trauma Liaison for Korthari subjects. Further recommendations welcomed. It was rare for Command to show that much flexibility. But maybe they understood something important now. The Korthari weren't just engineered animals. They weren't weapons. They were survivors. And survivors didn't need to be studied. They needed to be seen. 3 months later, somewhere outside San Diego, Earth, Tirek sat in the shade of a massive oak tree in the yard behind the Xenovet facility. Birds fluttered nervously nearby and used his size. He ignored them. His head rested on the grass, eyes half-lidded in sleep. A faint breeze ruffled his backplates. Belle walked outside, coffee in hand, still adjusting her coat. "Nap time again?" she teased. A slow rumble answered her, a sound somewhere between a sigh and a purr. "Lazy thing," she added, but she smiled. She sat beside him, letting the silence stretch. There was nothing to fix now, no procedures to perform, just the slow work of healing, him and her both, because grief didn't vanish, but it could be carried if someone was willing to share the weight. Tirek shifted, curling slightly toward her, his flank pressing lightly against her side. She chuckled. "Easy, buddy," she whispered, leaning against the warm mass of his body. And for the first time in a long, long time, both of them simply rested, not surviving, living.